after you have marked your pattern, you've done all the modifications you're going to do, your next thing is to trim the pattern. And we need to leave about 1/4 of an inch around it. And so 1/4 of an inch, it's not a huge amount, it's just a little amount. But the one thing that we don't want to do is cut right on the cutting line. Because if we're not careful cutting the pattern out and we cut the cutting line wrong, then it's going to be hard to get our pieces cut nicely and accurately. So we're going to leave about 1/4 of an inch. Now, if I look at the side over here, this is, and this is on both of the big pieces, the side is a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch, so I'm not even going to bother to cut that side off. But I am going to cut around the other 3 sides. So I'm going to start here at the top. I'm right-handed, so I always want to cut counterclockwise. If I cut clockwise, if I try to cut this way, I really can't see the line. So I want to always be able to see the line as I'm cutting. And if I hold my scissors in my hand like this and cut this way, then I can see the line. If I'm left-handed, I would just turn, and again, I want to be able to see the line. So in order to do that, I am going to cut clockwise. So right-handed, cut counterclockwise, left-handed, cut clockwise. All right, so I really don't need all of this extra stuff over here. I'm just going to trim it off. And I remember I want to leave about 1/4 of an inch all the way across the top here. I am not cutting right on the line. I'm cutting it so that there's about 1/4 of an inch off. And it's a little bit jagged there. I'm not even worried about this. All this extra paper goes in the recycle bin, so don't throw it in the regular trash can, and certainly don't leave it on the floor. All right, so now I'm going to cut up this side. It's got a lot more curves and whatever. And remember, if you are doing the other shorts, there's a little skinny line that you're going to ignore, and you're going to do this bigger line that's right here, because you need that extra amount, that little extra angle there, in order to have enough for your hem. But I'm making a longer short, so I'm going to start cutting down here. And again, I'm leaving about 1/4 of an inch. I am not going to cut my notches off because I need them. Don't cut those off. If you cut them off, you still have to mark them some other way, and that's just more work to do. So around this curve, I want to be careful. And since I am going to put the fake fly on, I'm going to cut around here. If you are doing the straight part, you're going to have a straight front, you're not going to have this extra fake fly on here, then you would cut along this line up here, this one that we drew in. But I'm doing the fake fly, so I'm going to come around the corner here. Again, I want to leave about 1/4 of an inch, and this doesn't have to be super accurate. You just don't want all that extra fabric flopping around when you're trying to get the patterns on the paper. And there's a little step right here. Make sure that you cut around that as well. Okay. So if I look down here at the bottom, mine is a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch, so I'm going to go ahead and cut a little bit of that off. I don't think it's going to hurt on the side seam, but at the bottom, I'm going to cut a little bit of that off. Just a little bit. Okay, so there's that one. I'm not going to cut out the back one right now. I'm going to do that off camera because it's basically done the same way as the front. One thing to remind you is if you're doing the low rise, remember you're going to use this as your cutting line. So you would do your 1/4 of an inch right about here, not up here. So it would be right about here. So remember, this is your cutting line. Don't cut right on it right now. You're going to do that when you're cutting your fabric. So cut about 1/4 of an inch above your low rise cutting line. Okay. One of the things I am going to do though is rough cut this because it's kind of hard to cut these when you've got big chunky patterns. So I'm just going to kind of rough cut around these to get the big chunk away from the two pockets. And I'm going to do this one off camera because it's pretty much the same way as the other one. You have about 1/4 of an inch right here already, so I'm not going to trim that side, but I am going to trim the rest of it. Again, leaving about 1/4 of an inch. And I'm just going around that curve. It's about 1/4 of an inch there, so I'm not going to cut right there. I'm going to just keep going up the curve. And then set that aside. Don't lose any of the pieces that you need. Now, you have to do at least one pocket. So you're either going to be cutting out the patch pocket or you're going to be cutting out the side pockets, whichever one you're going to do. If you're going to do both, like me, you have to cut everything out. So the reason why we didn't highlight the cutting lines on the pockets is the pockets are the same no matter what size you do. We did all of that extra marking on the front and back because people are, this is a multi-size pattern, people are using different sizes, and we want to make sure that you know where you're supposed to be cutting. Because it would be a disaster if you cut the two things different sizes. Alrighty, so I have my front cut out, I have my two pockets cut out. I'm going to finish this in just a minute, and remember all of this goes into the recycle bin. Get cutting.